All right, so I'm going to introduce the speakers for today for our webinar From Legacy to Resilience. We have Christin Jolicoeur, the Watershed Programs Manager for Arlington County's Department of Environmental Services, where she leads a talented team responsible for municipal separate storm sewer system, or as we know, MS4 permit compliance, stormwater management facility maintenance, and the county's water quality capital program. She has 20 years of experience in watershed management and ecological restoration and a master's degree in marine sciences from UNC Chapel Hill. Also on this project is Aileen Winquist, who has 25 years of experience in environmental communications and engagement. Aileen has a master's degree in environmental science from the University of Virginia and manages communications for Arlington County stormwater programs, including public engagement for stream and wetland projects, stormwater capacity projects, Green Street projects, Arlington stormwater utility, and coordinating the county's educational programs on preventing pollution and reducing runoff. And then in our second project today for the Bellevue Park Ponds, first we have Susan Beck, a senior water project manager at Jacobs Engineering Group. Susan has over 18 years of experience in sustainable site design, hydrologic, hydrologic analysis, water resources management, and green infrastructure implementation and design. She is the project manager supporting the Green Infrastructure Program for the City of Lancaster. And last but not least, we have Claire Maulhardt, the Stormwater Utility Director for Capital Region Water in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, an integrated planning approach to control wet weather. Her motto is "Design with nature and strong communities will emerge." Embedding natural processes within the cornerstone of development will fuel the health of our ecosystems and community in urban watersheds. Claire has over 15 years' experience in watershed planning and water resource design. She received her degree in landscape architecture from the University of Oregon and is a licensed landscape architect in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much to our speakers. And with that, I will hand it over for our first set of presentations.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Let me go ahead and share the slides here. Make sure. How does that look for everybody? Okay.
I think my slides might still be up.
No, I think we can see hers.
Oh,
Yep.
perfect. Then mine are
Yeah.
just up on my screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. I will jump in because I know we have a lot to talk about, and I'm excited to see everyone on the webinar today. So, again, my name is Aileen Winquist, and Kristen and I will be talking about our Ballston Wetland project, which was completed in 2023. And you can see here the location. We are from Arlington County, so the location of the project in the red circle here. And Arlington, as many of you know, is very urban jurisdiction adjacent to the nation's capital. We are the smallest county in the United States at just under 26 square miles, but a pretty high population density. And obviously, Arlington developed, quite a number of years ago, primarily in the 40s, 50s, 60s was a lot of our extensive development in the county, and that was prior to any real stormwater management and environmental regulations. So that's, one thing that we deal with in terms of our stormwater program today is trying to, modify and update as we, talked about with the webinar, kind of moving from some of these legacy uses to more modern stormwater design. So, and again, we do have about 43% impervious of our development in Arlington. So just to give you that background. So the Ballston Wetland, the pond was initially built as a dry pond. You can see again kind of the location here when 66, Highway 66 was built in 1980. And it has been modified over the years, but it was never really designed for stormwater treatment. It was really designed mainly as for stormwater detention at that time. And it's in the Lubber Run. You can see the blue border here shows the Lubber Run watershed. It is drains about 450 acres from the Lubber Run watershed, and the stream flows through the kind of east side of the pond there, you can see. And luckily, we had a resident who loved taking pictures all around the county. And so we do have some historical photos of the pond at the time. So you can see kind of the original design of the detention pond here. And you can see the culvert and where Liver Run flows through, like, again, on the east side of the pond there in 66 when it was first built. So. But as we noted, the pond was not really designed for stormwater treatment, and so there was no way to kind of collect sediment or trash or to allow for easy maintenance of the pond. So over the years, it filled in with a lot of sediment and litter and invasive plants, kind of took over, and it was a challenge, for the county to try to manage it again because there weren't any easy ways like with the new design to kind of take care of that maintenance. So this did offer the largest opportunity for stormwater treatment in Arlington. Again, because of our extensive development that we have, the county is very heavily built out, and so there are not many, larger spaces like this where we can put in a larger stormwater facility. We did some of the design and public process actually about 2011, 2012, and then there were some delays in moving to construction because of easement negotiations and some other projects that we were working on as well. So, and there were multiple funding streams. Christin will talk a little bit more about the funding later in the presentation. So again, this was a key project for our regulatory, goals with the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, being passed in 2010, and then the county had new stormwater management targets included in our stormwater permit to reduce stormwater, specific targets for stormwater pollution reduction in our permit from DEQ. And then we also adopted a stormwater master plan in 2014, and that included a strategy to try to, look at all of our existing facilities and try to improve those and also add new stormwater treatment facilities. So just a note on the engagement, there was a pretty extensive engagement process for this project. And so we did have an advisory committee that was put together for this, and that included there were 4 civic associations that are adjacent to the pond. And so we had representatives from the civic associations, also some of the environmental groups and county commissions. And so that advisory group met multiple times, in addition to having broader public meetings. And there were multiple design concepts that were developed. Initially we met with the advisory group in the community to get their goals and thoughts and desires for the space, in addition to the water quality goals. And then you can see on the right here were some of the design concepts that were created. So there was one with a more complicated flow path, one with sort of a simpler flow design, and then one that included more boardwalks and sort of entry spaces throughout the pond. So the one on the top was the one that was eventually chosen as the preferred design. So some of the key findings from the public process was that the community was really valued this sort of natural area, even in its prior condition, where it had some of the challenges with trash and sediment and things. But it's in a very urban node in Arlington near the Ballston Metro, and so they really valued the sort of natural space in that location. People were concerned about, trash and litter, and so that was something that we wanted to address with the design is trying to add more management for that. And the community did, want to choose a design that provided the maximum water quality benefits. So that again was the option kind of that had the more longer, flow path and more extensive flow areas. So. And then there was an existing wooden platform on the south side of the pond, but they did appreciate that as well. But we decided, it was suggested to move it to the east side of the pond, and that would help separate it from a pretty heavily used bike trail, just to avoid any bicyclist and walker pedestrian conflicts. So as you can see here, I'm going to turn it over to Christin to talk some more about the design and some of the construction details. But you can see many of the features here that were included in the pond, were selected again to address those maintenance issues, and also based on the feedback from the community process in terms of the trash control and the platform that was eventually installed. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Christin.
Thanks, Eileen.
Mhm.
So while we're on this slide, I just wanted to bring back up something that you probably noted from the timeline. We had an initial design of this project, and then we had to take a break because we needed easements from two commercial and one multifamily properties along the east side of the pond. And that led to a significant delay. So when we picked this project back up in 2019, there were things that we looked at again and realized we might want to reconsider. And so we had a little bit of redesign. I want to acknowledge RK&K, who was the designer for this project, and their assistance with that process. As Eileen mentioned, this is the final design. This is the kind of the schematic we were using to introduce this project to the community once we were at the point of going to construction. You'll notice one of the key features is a new forebay where the water enters the pond. That forebay allows for maintenance. It allows sediment to drop out. It was lined with articulated concrete blocks so we can get equipment down in there and scoop out the sediment without destroying the forebay. And then from the forebay, there are two exits into the pond. One, which was set at the lower elevation, so it was the preferred outlet, was into the wetland complex and had the circuitous wetland flow path for maximum water quality treatment. And then we had a slightly higher set elevation for the outlet weir into the primary flow path for Lubber Run, which, as we indicated, flows through what became the wetland. So that was a pretty key component of the design. The outlet weir at the south end of the pond was able to be reconfigured and reconstructed. We added a few features for habitat. We added the multiple layers of wetland vegetation and the multiple depths of water. So we have deep water areas and more shallow areas that are about 3 to 4 feet deep. And then we had submerged wetland vegetation as well as emergent marsh, and a few forested wetland islands for diversity of habitat. We also had some floatable BMPs, which was we had a water goat at the inlet to collect trash coming into the pond, which there was a lot of trash coming into this feature. And then we also installed a trash rack at the outlet. We'll talk about funding in a little bit, but one of the other key features were the park amenities, including the observation platform, which is on the east side of the pond, and that was a major component. We had some funding from our parks department for those site amenities, and it was really a benefit to the project to be able to include those. So this was a major construction project. Again, want to acknowledge the contractor who undertook the construction, which was Environmental Quality Resources. They did a lot of rethinking of the construction approach on the fly, I guess I would say. Again, because this was an online pond, managing the water flow during construction was a major issue. We had a lot of concern from our regulatory staff about big storm events and what that might mean during construction. And so what EQR did was they graded out the Lubber Run flow-through path first so they could stabilize that, and then did the construction of the wetland complex. And these pictures show the massive earth moving operation that was required to remove all of the trash and sediment and invasive plants and debris that had accumulated over about almost 40 years of of neglect in this pond. It was a major operation to excavate all of that, dewater it, and then bring in some limited amounts of stable fill were needed to bring it in to create the grading. Next slide. So this is what the pond looked like during construction before all the vegetation was planted, and you can see the wetland flow paths as they're being constructed. And on the right are the two overflow weirs. As I mentioned, one of them was the set to the primary elevation to allow water to flow into the wetland complex, and then there was another flow path to allow flow into Lubber Run. Maintenance considerations were among our primary considerations for this. We wanted to avoid the situation that had led to the need for this facility in some part to be rebuilt. And so being able to get into the forebay and clean out any sediment was one of the key components of this. We created a composite wood boat ramp that allowed for getting in to not only to clean out the forebay, but also for boats to get in to do vegetation management on the islands, to collect trash, and to maintain the water goat. We also created some grass paved access areas, one which led to the boat ramp, and then another one on the south side of the pond, which allowed access to the outlet weir for maintenance. I talked a lot about the wetland plants and the varying types of habitat that we created in this wetland. There were over almost 300 trees planted, and then about a total of 20,000 wetland and 35 upland plugs, along with seeding and 5,000 shrubs. So we did a lot of planting. The total acreage of the wetland, once it was complete, was over 4¼ acres. So it was a really large project in that regard. And these are just a few of the native species that we used for that revegetation. I mentioned wildlife habitat. That was a major focus of the community. And as a result of that, we used some trees from on site to create turtle basking logs. And we have noticed that those are getting a lot of use. This illustrates the water goat, which is one of our BMP, one of our floatables BMPs. This collected trash at on the north side of the pond. It's I don't know how many of you have heard of water goats, but it's essentially a float with a net on the bottom, and it's can be detached and pulled in to clean out the trash, or you can take a boat out to clean it out. This is a picture of the observation platform that was installed. You can see that it actually extends out over the constructed wetland. We installed, this is 2 of the informational signs that we installed on the railing. There were 3 total, talking about the water quality benefits of the project and the wildlife supported by the wetland. So what were the overall water quality benefits? Well, I mentioned the trash rack and the water goat, which were both floatables best management practices. Those did contribute to our MS4 compliance. Aileen also mentioned this was our single largest water quality treatment facility that we are able to provide in Arlington. There were about 230 impervious acres treated, and we have the numbers there for the nutrient and sediment removal. All in all, this project contributed towards about 10% of the county's overall Chesapeake Bay cleanup target, which was a huge component of our target. And also the project decreases Lubber Run peat flows by 30%. In terms of funding, we had numerous funding sources. The total cost of the project was about $4.25 million for construction and close to $5 million total. Much of that was provided by our water quality or environmental quality capital program from the stormwater side, but we also had a grant from DEQ. We had stormwater local assistant funds that contributed to the cost, about 0.6 million. And then we had a site plan contribution from one of the site plans adjacent to the wetland, and that our Parks Department managed those funds. It was about $1 million. Subsequent to construction, we're contributing about $15,000 annually towards maintenance. One of the key components of this project is the post-construction maintenance. We created a maintenance agreement with our Parks Department and the Department of Environmental Services both contributed to. And we also engaged the construction contractor, EQR, for 2 years. They provided a 2-year warranty for the plants, as well as invasive control and initial establishment watering for the trees. The county took on inspection of the wetland performance, including maintaining the water goat and cleaning out the 4-bay annual inspection. And after the EQR have finished with their work, we'll take on the invasive control for another 3 years before handing it over to our Parks Department. We wanted to mention and show a picture of the trash rack at the outflow. I didn't also mention the beaver baffles. One of the reasons why the pond had filled with sediment is that we did have beavers that came in and were precluding outflow. So it was really important that we didn't attract beavers to the outflow facility. So we included a beaver baffles that prevented the sound of flowing water and prevented them from taking up residence or trying to clog the pipes. But what we decided to use was an HDPE trash rack. And I think we have another slide that shows what happened to that trash rack during one of the subsequent storms. What we didn't take into account was the sheer weight of some of the invasive aquatic plants that invaded the pond that we have since gotten a better hold on. But the water primrose was pretty thick in there for a while, and at the time of this storm, the plant debris piled up against the trash rack and it imploded, which was lesson learned. And this is just another picture of the pond. This is about a year after construction. We're really grateful to the entire team that contributed to the success of this project. I mentioned our Kankakee designer. Our Roadside and Harwell was also involved for landscape design, and then environmental quality resources and wetland studies on the construction side. This project has gotten numerous awards, including the Dave Pearson Watershed Excellent Project Award from the Virginia Lakes and Watershed Association, and of course, the BUBBA in 2025. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Maybe before we go to our second presentation, we can try to quickly address just a couple specific questions. So this one in the chat, we can start off real quick. What was the solution to the track rack collapse? And someone else had asked in the Q&A how trash management is going, if you want to address that real quick.
Yes, so what we decided to do is, rather than replace the trash rack because of the cost of that, we decided to use potentially procure another water goat for the lower end of the pond. And so that's our chosen strategy at the moment for dealing with the trash at the outflow. The trash collection is going really well. We've been surprised at how effective the water goat has been at the inflow, but we do also have our maintenance contractor pick up trash along the shorelines. I think they do that quarterly, so we do have that work done as well.
Great, thank you. And we'll do two other quick ones. One has to do, a combined question has to do with wildlife, about if fish passage was considered with the design, and then also was any thought given to roadkill as far as increasing habitat next to an interstate?
So in terms of fish passage, there isn't a lot of open water upstream of this facility. There's one very small section of stream that's upstream, so that wasn't a huge consideration for this. And then in terms of roadkill, there is a pretty significant fence. The VDOT owns, manages I-66, and they have a pretty significant fence that separates the pond from the highway. I'm not sure if that answers that question, but.
No, yeah, I think that's good. And if the Kyle, if you have any follow-up, feel free to add to the chat if you'd like. All right, well, hopefully we'll get back to some of these other questions in the chat at the end. I also encourage folks to put them in the Q&A just to make sure they don't get missed. But let's switch gears over into our next presentation.
Can you all see the slides now?
Yes, looks great.
Perfect. Well, again, hi, I'm Claire Maulhardt. I'm with Capital Region Water, and I'm going to jump right in and initially going to speak a little bit about Capital Region Water and our, sort of unique position that we're in. We're a municipal authority within Pennsylvania, and we represent or provide services for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater services across Harrisburg and several of the joining townships, because we also own and operate the drinking water facility as well as the wastewater facility that many of them, those communities, convey their wastewater and stormwater to, as well as the, and then we distribute drinking water. And I'll jump to here. So again, this kind of shows our service area. We are in Winterset, we're a separate entity, but we're part of the city of Harrisburg. And so with that, we in about 2013 took over all of those assets from the city as the municipal authority. And with that, all of the regulatory obligations around that as well. So we also uniquely, we own and operate the MS4 permit, for example, as well as much of the city of Harrisburg is a combined sewer system, which is a huge driver, huge initiative for this work. So while we're talking about stormwater, this project does uniquely sit upstream of our combined sewer system, and the flows out of these ponds currently dump back into the combined sewer as well. So it has sort of dual purpose for that. And with that, the immediate timeline for this project started back in 2017, but prior to that, there was broader engagement across all of the city of Harrisburg through this community greening plan process, and this is one of many projects identified in that effort. And so this, talking with the community group in this particular neighborhood, which is the Bellevue Park historic neighborhood, which we'll go into a little bit, really is a unique component within the broader urban landscape of Harrisburg. Much of the rest of Harrisburg, aside from this neighborhood, is, tight row homes, smaller blocks, smaller lot sizes, and dense capital downtown. And you kind of that'll be surrounding this entire very green neighborhood that turns into single family homes, quite large lots. And you kind of drop into it, and it's almost a little bit magical in how you're like, wait, I was just in what I thought was a city, and now I'm in this little beautiful little neighborhood. So it's really a one of a kind in a strategy towards our regulatory needs. And so it fits within, again, we have the community greening plan, and then that community greening plan sits within our City Beautiful H2O program plan, which is our long-term control plan for CSO control. But it's also thought of as an integrated planning approach to all of our regulatory needs. And again, so this takes us through, this project was, again, a long time coming, similar to the project you just heard about, where we had a lot of field work and detailed design that led into construction, bidding and construction. And part of it, and we'll go into detail, there was an extended timeline off of construction because we used technology as one of our bases for performance. And that took a couple of years to really dial it in. And you'll see that it really we come to benefit from that process. So again, the historic context here is very unique. This was the first planned residential community established in 1910 and was designed by the renowned landscape architect Warren Manning. It has over 12 acres of open space that were called these reservations, and these ponds were designed features. They weren't just existing. They were design features in what was just an intermittent stream, Mish Run, that ran up through this part of the city. And so we looked to talk with this neighborhood. The neighborhood is, very attached to this historic, the historic presence of this neighborhood. They wear this like a badge of honor, and many of the residents are older and have a lot of ownership of the historic components of the space and what it means in even the broader context of planning in the United States. And so we came in here and we had this unique challenge of retrofitting ponds to meet design goals without losing or altering the historic character of both the ponds and the landscape around it. So, but it wasn't in great shape when we got here. Existing conditions were challenging. A lot had changed upstream of these ponds that had led to the ponds being silted in. And there's a huge 42-inch storm pipe that was flowing into these ponds. Originally these weren't, there wasn't a lot of stormwater directed through these ponds. And then they were kind of commandeered by recent development, in the last 20 years, and said to be, well, these will be the stormwater features for that upstream impervious area, without really doing anything to these ponds. Because of all that too, there's a lot of erosion and sediment issues, and therefore, there was water ponded, but it was water without a whole lot of life in it. It had some, carp and other, still does, but what you could say wildlife, but mostly just what was dumped in there, and that could survive in water with zero oxygen, and fish that could bury themselves in the mud and live for years. So we came in with this goal, and the neighborhood had this goal. They had been approaching us to be like, these need major overhaul. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. When we also need to make them function for stormwater and help us with our downstream issues. So then locally, we wanted to help address the water quality of the ponds, optimize them for stormwater management, improve the habitat and ecological function, all while balancing landscape aesthetics and function. The community had similar goals, but wanted to maintain the historic character of the ponds as a centerpiece to the neighborhood, and retain and enhance the recreational opportunities. They have, trails around this space, and this is kind of in the valley of the neighborhood, and so people are constantly walking around and enjoying this green space. So in the broader context, we have all of this, about 55 acres of drainage, focusing then down into the drainage through the ponds. And so these were just at a snapshot, the characteristic of the existing condition and what we were looking to manage and what our goals were here for volume control. And I think, am I starting to pass it off to you, Susan? I can't remember. Or
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the goal was to maximize these, was to maximize these for stormwater management. It's about 16 acres of impervious, total of 55 acres draining into the ponds. And the goal was ultimately to be able to manage the first inch of runoff from the impervious surfaces.
Yeah, and then actually I'll jump back down to this and talk a little bit about the community process as well. So again, it was really this unique situation where we were trying to balance the beauty and historic character of these ponds with the resiliency that we wanted to place into it. And at first, we brought a lot of different concepts to the community, and really what happened there became a little bit of tension that actually wasn't between Capital Regional Water and the neighborhood association. It was between kind of two philosophies within the neighborhood themselves, of groups of people who, on one hand, and we had one design that was very let's just turn these whole things into wetlands, and then there's the other group, of a more historically focused group, who's like, no, we need to have this open water. It is it's a historic landscape feature. It's very critical to preserving the character. And so we really were sort of the mediators between, okay, well, we can make both things work, and had to kind of navigate that and find even a blend of those two different concepts. And so it was leave more open water and have on the edges, some wetland like features. And then how are we going to, maximize volume control? Well, and what we'll lead into is let's use technology to help us do that. And then the other piece is really even paying very close attention, like these slides show, to the historic character of even just something as simple as using native natural stone, actually in combination with stamped concrete that you can't even tell is concrete. It's stained and painted to match the natural stone color and mimic that historic spillway that was original, which was not what was there when we came upon it. What was there was a dilapidated V-channel spillway that was getting undermined by head cutting. So we really took it back and blended the two needs. So yeah, with that, I'll let Susan jump into more of the technology side of it and how we made it all work.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. So yeah, well, obviously we had a challenge here in trying to maximize the stormwater performance in ponds that were, as Claire mentioned, were never designed for stormwater. They're landscape ponds. So we really had to deal with the fact that we had limited space to grade out and to provide more storage area to manage the stormwater in a passive way. We also had to maintain free water surface flow. So just a standard passive kind of engineered outlet design really wasn't going to work here. So we looked to using a CMAC system. And for those of you who aren't familiar with CMAC, it stands for Continuous Monitoring and Adaptive Controls. And essentially what it does is it uses a cellular connection. If you could just go back real quick, a cellular connection to obtain weather forecasts. And then it used smart controls in a software platform. This is actually the Opti system to manage the water levels in the pond. And so it incorporates a level sensor, so the system knows how much water is in the pond, and then it has an actuated valve that will automatically open and close to control the water level in the pond. So based on the weather forecast and within a predicted threshold, the ponds can drain during dry weather to provide additional storage for runoff that is expected in that forecast. And this system is also equipped with solar panels for power. So the system essentially drains during dry weather, and then it is also able to maintain the flow rate through that actuated valve, that butterfly valve, to the required release rate. And you can go to the next slide and we can look at an actual storm. This is the Opti dashboard, where you can look at how the system is performing and look back at events. This is an event back in March of 24. It's about 1.2 inches, a little bit over 24 hours, but that was very close to what we were trying to design for, which was a one inch rainfall event. You can advance the slide here, and what you see on the left here in the green box is the water level on the top area. You see that the dry weather drawdown, and then the release rate, the flow rate, and on the bottom bar, you can see that that's able to release that water to provide the storage within the pond. And then during wet weather, in the orange, and then as that proceeds, you can see that the butterfly valve actually is releasing the green. The green line there is actually the flow rate, and the goal was to keep the wet weather release below 0.83 cubic feet per second. And you can see that it's actually releasing a little bit at a time during the storm in order to maintain the storage volume required to manage that full volume from that storm event. We also looked at, so the system works for us for what we designed. We initially designed the system based on CRW's typical year swim model to look at the performance on an average annual basis. And it was designed initially to manage 1 inch of runoff. It's about 86% of the annual rainfall events on an annual basis. When we look back, we did a reevaluation in 2025 to look at the performance. We actually found that the system well exceeded the original design and was managing about 98% of the storms and about 2 inches of runoff on an annual basis. In terms of volume, the system reduces the total wet weather outflow by about 86%. And then it manages, so it's able to actually reduce the total volume. Then when it doesn't have enough storage, it does release some of that, but at or below the release rate. So it's managing storms about 90% of the total volume that was flowing in 2025. And obviously some of those that will vary year to year, depending on the rainfall distribution out of any given year, but it's very promising in the performance so far. And just some after pictures. You can see this is the upper pond. You can see that the native vegetation enhancements around the edges of the pond, and then in the distance, we were able to incorporate some access boulder stepping stones to allow access to the water. And then the after photo of the lower pond with the new spillway, regraded banks that are no longer eroded, and they're planted native vegetation, and the free surface flow you can see on that lower spillway.
Yeah, just something to note here. We didn't necessarily provide any photographs, but similar to the other project, this was a messy job. We had to excavate out a bunch of sediment that had filled in, but down to there's an existing clay layer that had created the ponds in the first place. And so we had to be pretty careful with that. Plus, as I think noted in the existing conditions, all those deposits had a lot of heavy metals and contaminants. So we had to landfill all of that. And it was really mucky, and our contractor had to do a lot of things to get it to like solidify in order to even truck it off site using, inert, and it had to be inert, additives to do so. Yeah, shout out to the contractor there, like you did, Shiloh, who had to work in quite mucky conditions. So
It was a challenge for sure.
yeah. And then here's
Yeah, here's the spillway with a little video just to see the water flowing. And this also, in addition to looking historic, it actually made the spillway enhanced from an engineering perspective that it could handle larger storms. The previous spillway was overtopping and was about, in danger of failing. So the new spillway design allowed this pond to pass larger storms than previous, and we also incorporated stream crossing in the distance there at the stream.
And this was an important piece of it, that release of water. The neighborhood was very interested in having the sound of water. It's not always necessarily flowing as much as it is in this photo, but there's always a constant trickle. Yeah. So yeah, lessons learned. Go ahead. Yeah.
Lessons were basically that the system ended up exceeding our stormwater requirements. The use of the CMAQ really enhanced the design, and that we were able to maintain and meet all of the goals for the project. The other beauty of the CMAQ system is it provides flexibility for CRW to control water storage, both for maintenance as well as the system changes, both in terms of inflows and as their needs may change in the future. They can modify how the system functions. And obviously there's so many co-benefits here in terms of recreation, enhancing green space, ecosystem services, climate resilience. And as Claire, I think you summarized very well, just working with any community, just really having as much patience and education. They're really key to getting the community buy-in. And I think we had some big resistors of this project as we were trying to get through design. And now I would say those folks are largely champions of the project and how it ended up.
Yeah, there was a few sort of historic preservation champions who initially ruffled at the project, only to be then folks that lifted up this project to Harrisburg Historic Association, and it won a Historic Preservation Award, among other awards in the engineering community. So that's been a really great kind of like shining star, balancing these aspects. And to the point of how we can modify things, for example, right now when we're talking about how much we're managing, that's only with the allowable drawdown with the community, where we could actually take these ponds down twice as far if needed, say in an emergency situation, which again we haven't had to do yet, but that's that flexibility exists. So yeah, so I think that's what we can turn it back over to you, Michelle, for questions.
Amazing. Thank you all. Thank you to all of our speakers. These were such insightful projects and really community focused and community facing projects. I think the common thread here, of course, is that you had to balance a lot of different voices and a lot of different needs and create projects that balanced both those stormwater goals as well as those public goals. So we do have a couple questions and we have some time. We might go a little bit over one, but I'll try to wrap things up close to one. And if anyone has questions that don't get answered, you can feel free to reach out to myself or Missy or our presenters, but we can also do that connection for you if you have any questions and want to reach out to anyone specifically. But to go a little bit more specific into the CMAQ questions or CMAQ system, we'll address some of these questions. So we had some questions about what the maintenance schedule looks like, as well as the annual average costs for the CMAQ system, and if there's any issues with vandalism to the system, since it's sort of out public facing.
Claire, you may be able to talk to the maintenance better than I will.
Yeah. Yeah. So so this project got rolled into our whole suite of green infrastructure assets. We have, which we've now transitioned in-house, but we initially had 2 landscape contractors on board to operate and maintain our assets monthly. So this site is visited monthly, cleaning out trash, dealing with any sort of erosion issues. We also, after any kind of storm, are monitoring those overflow points and clearing any debris. So that happens immediately. Vandalism, fortunately, not a whole lot. We haven't had big issues with that. We've had like random things get thrown into the ponds, which we'll have to go fish out. Yeah, fortunately, not much destruction. There was a huge random tornado that came through and like knocked out like 100+ trees just north of these ponds, and fortunately missed the pond, went just past the ponds. Otherwise, we might have lost the solar panels and other things. So that was kind of crazy, but yeah.
And I think there is actually security cameras in this neighborhood as well, which I think helps deter it as well.
It also seems like this community really cares about this asset. So hopefully just having those eyes in the neighborhood would help deter some of that vandalism. Yeah. Also some questions for this project about nutrient monitoring. Are you monitoring for nutrients? And also a question, I can't remember if this was on the slide, if you had the phosphorus and nitrogen reductions.
We actually didn't track that specifically for this. Again, this actually, it's a separate storm area that dumps back into the combined. So we're actually getting volume. We were targeting more volume control than those nutrient controls. So we've done that where we've analyzed what that is specifically for that acreage. I don't know that I have the numbers independent of like the overarching greened acres. But we do have like a larger tracking of that, which again, it does keep it out of the stormwater itself, that then, the combined with the combined sewer in the waterways is beneficial. But sorry, I don't have those like specific numbers for the acreage.
And the pre-event drawdown does go to the treatment plant. So
right.
And you do get that constant flushing as well. So I think overall, it helps to prevent kind of what happened initially with the passive system, where it just silted in and became very eutrophic.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know actually if there's any sediment release from it, because one of the other aspects upstream of these ponds, we put in a vortex structure to have all like trash and sediment drop out. So the water coming into the ponds is actually pretty clear and clean. So, and then we factor out that vortex structure regularly.
These were some questions for the Ballston Wetland project, but I think both can answer. It's relevant to both. I think about invasive management plans. How intensive has that effort needed to be? And if there's plans for for the Ballston Wetland, once the 2 years with the contractor support phases out, what the plan is for that. So if both projects want to speak a little bit about how they deal with invasives.
Yeah, for Ballston, invasive control and management is a huge item. There are a lot of invasive species in the park before the project, and some of that persisted. So yeah, we have the contractor assisting us for the first 2 years, and then we will use another contractor after that for that work.
For Bellevue, so there's sort of the outskirts that are the most difficult to manage because of what, like English ivy and other things that are coming in from the larger reservations. Fortunately, we continue to work with the neighborhoods. They do like a spring and a fall cleanup and have asked what invasives they should target. So there's that piece of it. And then again, we're there monthly, so we are targeting weeding on a regular basis. One of the things we did as part of the design, is just kind of my philosophy, is I tend to overpack the plants in at the start to really limit how much bare ground there is, and really give the best chance for those natives and native adaptive plants that we're trying to establish.
This is also a question for Bellevue Park Ponds. What stabilizes the exposed pond banks when the water is drawn down? Is that an issue at all, Claire?
No, it's very limited time frame that the below the water level is exposed. It only draws it down the amount needed and then tends to fill back up. But it is they are lined ponds, so it's pretty stable now below that, and then the plant life that's on the edges.
Right. All right, well, I'm going to wrap things up. I think we had a couple sort of specific lingering questions. If anyone wants to get those questions answered, feel free to send myself or Missy an email and we can connect you with the speakers. But thank you so much for you all for coming. And thank you, of course, to our presenters, especially for your time in this presentation. I put a bunch of links into the chat if you're interested in learning more about the BUBBAs or about our future webinars. And one last thing, I saw a question about floating wetlands, and we will have a webinar specifically about a floating wetlands project at the end of March. So keep your eye out for that in our newsletter. But thank you all so much again, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.